I've got this chiller purge line here, which is why you see a non-HVAC flare nut on there. And you know, by the way, these thin ones like this, I mean, I never buy them because I don't see any reason to buy them unless they're just cheaper. But anyways, these are going to be for like water lines or oil lines or something like that. Your thicker ones like this, those are HVAC flare nuts, and some of the reasons for that have to do with just you know, you can get them tighter with less risk of that brass splitting, because I have seen cheap brass fittings split right down here. Also, like, let's say you got a mini split or something, you know, you don't want condensation getting in here and then in the winter freezing and like cracking the nut either. So these are just all around better. But this is the one that I've got to fix here. So let me show you what's going on. You know, it's a typical situation where I want to put a new flare on because this flare looks like trash. Let me get a better picture of that. Oh yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? But obviously I want to replace that. You can see where you can see where I hammered the flare nut a bit to try to get it to come down here. All right, let me just show you how tight this thing is. I mean, I can barely rotate it. I'll try spraying a little WD in there. But yeah, she is very, very tight. And it might have something to do with a little bit of a bend there. So let me show you how I'm gonna fix this. All right, so here's a socket that I should at least be able to drive it down around there until it bottoms out. So let's give it a shot. There we go. Now most of your deep well sockets do have a shoulder down in there. So let's do the same thing with this. Ooh, that's nasty. Now, let's pretend that there was no way to get the flare nut down past like here. You can go in with a spin flare and try and like refurbish that surface, and I'll show you what that looks like now. Smoking. Now, lubricating anything that is spin related, like these flares or the swager, you know, is that better? I have found that in some cases it is, even though you're trying to use friction to heat the pipe to form it. Especially, you see how I have this bend here. You know, I was trying to just keep that flare from, or that spin flare from doing too much damage inside. So let's look at it now. All right, so with some sand cloth, just really doing a good job there, you could get this usable. Not necessarily for a mini split, but you could get it usable. Yeah, there we go. grabbed a wrench that slipped off of the flare nut and got me. Just trying to toughen up my gloves here. And that's when I switched over to the Knipex. Should have done that from the start. The only thing you have to be careful of with Knipex is that they can put so much pressure on something like a flare nut that they can distort the shape, and then after that you're screwed. Now, could I have just cut this off? Yes, most likely, and just got it to work a bit shorter. But this is a great opportunity to show some of the things you can do if that's not an option. So let's get in here. All right, smoking again. Okay, let's look at it now. Okay, so you can see there's a deformity there. It shows up especially well now that everything's shiny, but that's probably not repairable. But you can see under normal circumstances you can end up with a nice face if you just do a bit of polishing. Now, if you don't already know, this notch here in the tubing cutter is so that you can cut off a bell without cutting much of the tubing off. Otherwise you got to stick it way out here. Now this tubing here is pretty deformed, so I want to make sure that I'm getting a nice even cut. And then the technique for, I can't quite do it because the camera's in my way, but is to go around and spin it at the same time. That's the fastest way to cut off the end of tubing. Oops. Unless you do that right there. Again, the camera is right in my way. Yeah, I feel like I'm working with a disability when I'm here filming. All right, there we go. All right, now we're going to deburr it. Okay. And this is one of my favorite flare tools, despite how goofy it looks, for doing single flares. Now, when I'm doing mini splits, mostly I'm using double flares. All right, so we're on 3/8. Back this out. I've said this a million times, but for all my new subscribers, do yourself a favor and take the bar off the flaring tool. Man, it just makes life so much better, because you can move that fast, you can get everything tightened. So you see how that works. 3/8, and then you've got a stop there. But one of the reasons that I really like this flaring tool is because you see that cone and how it's like wobbly? That is on purpose. Don't try to tighten that up or change it. What that's doing, and you can feel it when you use the tool, is it's I'll tighten this a little extra, just because it's got that bend in the end there. But what it's doing is it's burnishing the face of that copper. So again, just gives you way more speed without that handle. The 90-degree is so that you can go up, and say you're hitting a pipe, go down, go up, go down. See how you can kind of work around. All right, so let me get this knocked out without knocking out the camera. So we're gonna go until so right in there, it's pretty tight, right? Now watch this. you're gonna feel a lot of tension. See, I'm moving this piece back, but it's not yet withdrawing, and I think there must be a spline on this nut or something so that it will continue to turn this cone until the threads bring it up enough to pull the cone back. So the cone is turning without being pulled back, and that's just genius. And that's why it stays hard to turn until so that cone is just going around and like pressure polishing that face. Okay, let's look at it now. Oh buddy, that's a beautiful looking flare. Yep, she's nice and pretty now. That'll seal for sure. Now, there's a little bit of crud in there that I'm gonna knock out from the Brillo pad. If this was something critical where I didn't want any of that in there, what I'd have done is shoved a bit of like paper towel down in here tight, and then just pulled it back out with a pick, and it would take all of that with it. All right, I'm just gonna demonstrate this process now. You don't want any jagged edges or anything that's going to get left behind in there. Oops, off frame. And I can't find the pick that I'm looking for. I think it's at the house, so I'm just going to use these tweezers. I'm going to put it down in there. Okay. Now, this is a bit risky here because the Utabit, you know, could go in there further than my tweezers can grab. I do have a straight pair though, so let's just give it a shot. Ooh. The Unibit did all my work for me. But you can see that, let me just do that again. It's not that difficult. You don't need it to fit super tight, just snug. It's not that difficult to get a paper towel back out. Main thing is just don't forget it's in there. But I've never lost a paper towel in a pipe ever. So if you're careful and you kind of know what you're doing, you should be fine. Let's watch this one more time. And now I don't think it's a spline. Looking closer at it, we have a roll pin right here. And so this right here must have like a sort of like a rectangular slot for that roll pin instead of just drilled through. So let's look at how this works one more time. Got this one tight, but okay, now let's go the other way. Okay, there we go. You can see it's still as tight as it was when I first tightened it. You do have to be careful not to over tighten flares, that is a thing, but anything, you know, if I'm doing like a 1/4 inch on a mini split, it's getting double flared, so I don't worry about it too much. All right, let's see what we got. I love opening the flare tool and then looking at it. It's kind of like a little surprise. Let's see. Oh yeah, looks real good. Now, this tool is very accurate with this little stop. However, I have found that sometimes it's a little rough as far as the size, and you know what I end up doing here in like a case like this is I'm just going to, if this was a mini split, I might consider cutting that off. But sometimes if I notice that's what it's doing, doesn't always do it like that, but if I notice that it's making the bells a little big, I just back it off like just a hair from that stop there. But basically what we want to do here is just push up and thread this. The nut's going to start threading up over. So let me do that now. Okay, all I'm doing here is I've got it threaded up and I'm just going around a couple times fast. Sorry, it's hard to get that in frame, but I'm just spinning it pretty fast when I'm not trying to avoid knocking the camera over, and it pretty much takes care of it. It's fine. I've never had a problem sealing them up like that. And now for this one, see, this bell here looks a little shorter, and maybe it has to do with the fact that it was bent. Okay, so as far as lubing up flares, a lot of times I'll use Nylog. I really don't think WD-40 would be a problem, but you do want lubricant right here. There's two things that does. Well, let me just back up and say I lubricate the male end of the flare, this, and the male threads. Light just timed out, but anyways, you definitely want some here. There's two things that does. It keeps the flare nut from twisting the pipe as you start to get it tighter, and it eliminates the friction so that all of your turning force is going into clamping and not into rotating this nut against a bunch of friction in here. All right, well, light timed out. I think that's our sign, but hopefully those were some helpful tips and tricks for flaring, and see you on the next one.